So I just wanted to welcome you to the Housing Transformation Summit. Sorry, I need to read my notes that they just gave me. So I'm so happy to be back again this year and grateful to have all of you as our guests. I am hosting the 5 sessions of finishes and personalization. I've put a lot of thought into what we're going to be talking about in the next 48 hours, and hopefully it will add value to what you guys are doing in your businesses today. I come from a background of, let's see, I'll probably age myself, but I started working in the industry on the production home building side in 1988, and with a home builder, a big home builder in Southern California, and then moved over to the design center and started running that, and was running design centers for about 30 years, and am still involved in doing that. I now have a company that I created about 6 years ago called Build It, Create It, Design It, or BCD-it. So what I do now in the market is I go in and I work with independent design professionals. So people that have small businesses, they're interior designers, architects, general contractors, and small home builders. And I help them run their business. I am the back end. I am the geek in the back end of the office to make sure everybody's profitable. And that's what I did in the design industry. I was never been a designer, nor do you want me to design any of your houses. So that's why these ladies are here, is because that's who you're going to want to talk to. I just make sure everybody's making money at the back end. So anyways, this is the first time the tech home builder is co-located and integrated with the Housing Transformation Summit, which focuses on digital transformation, personalization, and innovative structure and major systems. Combined, the summits are hosting 165 executives from some of the most powerful and progressive of builders and multifamily companies, and they'll be connecting with nearly 120 sponsor companies in 120 boardroom presentations and 2,200 one-on-one meetings. So, wow, sounds like you guys are going to be busy. To get the most of the next 48 hours, please be here, focus and on the people and the products and what we're doing. So what they've asked is we put our phones away. So if you guys can make sure your phones are off and put your phones away, that would be great. Your focus is going to be rewarded with practical and valuable ideas and connections, and that you will be able to offer. So as regard to this track and what I do, so I like to make it comfortable for everybody and do more like a fireside chat. And so we've put together some questions on each of the topics. So our first session is called Finished Home Customer Onboarding and Discovery, and that's what we're in right now. And I'll introduce our panelists in a few minutes, but you're going to hear about between starting out with sales and then the handoff to the design center and how that integration has worked and is working. And then the next one tomorrow morning is best practices for personalized option shopping and FF&A, furniture and finishes and accessories. And then in the afternoon tomorrow, we're going to talk about kitchens, great rooms, dining rooms, and outdoor living. And those are going to be the latest trends. And then the next morning is going to be master bedrooms and bathrooms, or not masters, main suites and bathrooms. And then the last day will be work studies and performing spaces. So that's what I'm going to do. If you guys want to ask any questions, please feel free. Just raise your hand, and then we'll try to call on you. And then since there's no mics in the audience, I'll repeat the question to make sure everybody hears it. So if we're all good with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I first would like to introduce Yvonne Espinoza. So she's the Vice President of Warmington Residential, and she's a Vice President of Sales at Warmington Residential. And then I'm Nancy Giangeruso. Brenda Kountz is down at the end over there, and she's the Design Center Manager at McDade. And then Nancy Rhea is my partner in crime over here, and she is the Design Center Manager at Camelot Homes. So we are going to talk about from the technical setup using digital design center technology to bonding, rapport, and trust. What does a great experience look like for your customers? And you know, everything's about experiences these days. So you know, I have young men or adults, and it's all about the experience when they're going somewhere. So like I said, it's a fireside chat. There's about 6 questions that we're going to go through that I thought were relevant to what we were going to be speaking about. So let's see if I can do this. Look at me. I know how to do things. Okay, so our first question is going to be, how do sales and/or designers get new home buyers comfortable with an online interface? So Brenda, let's start with you. Why don't you answer that question, how you guys are doing that or how you've done it in your past?
So in the past, we used a platform called Envision, which I'm assuming most people are familiar with or have had some experience with. And so that was our pre-shopping experience that buyers were able to use from the point of sale. They would get their access and online ID, and then up until the time that they had their design studio appointment, they could spend as much time building that wish list as they liked. And so sometimes nobody, it depended on more demographic. Sometimes we would see that our active adult buyers didn't engage as much with it as, let's say, some of the millennial buyers did. But there's so much tracking information that you can get from Envision. We could see how long every buyer before they came in, how long they spent on it. And then it was very helpful to our design team because they were able to print off that wish list, get items out. It saved time during the appointment as well, so that the designer had an idea of what was important to the buyer and could focus on those things. And so we would talk about it. I know from the point of sale, that was a very important step, obviously, that buyers were introduced to Envision at that time. And then we would encourage it again when they would call for their studio appointment, and then again when the designer would do an introductory email. So we would keep touching on it, just because for our builder it was very important, because they would see a 10% increase in what the buyer spend would be if they interacted with Envision and built their wish list, as opposed to the buyers that did not. So.
Great. How many of you guys are using any kind of catalog or online catalog at your sales offices? Great. Are they Envision? Great. Is it Envision you're using? Yes. Yes. Okay, got it. So yeah, so I'm familiar with Envision from when I was running ISI's design centers as well as Studio Chateau. So I know all about the catalog program. And when we were doing that with, when I was over at Chateau Interiors, we were seeing increases in sales just because people were able to be home and in their jammies looking at things and kind of reading through, and they saw the pricing. So it wasn't really a surprise when they got there. It wasn't a big shock of what it was. Am I correct? Yep. Okay, cool. So, hey, Nancy, why don't you answer? What are you guys doing with...
Well, what we did was we worked with our sales team to train on it. So they were actually not only familiar with just explaining what it did, they actually could get in there and maneuver through the software themselves. Because when customers would come in and they weren't familiar with it, they had a hard time in the beginning searching around and how to go through it and navigate. So we did that with all of our sales associates. So that was the very first touch point. And then once we reached out to them from the design studio to contact the customer, schedule an appointment. We would do a pre-appointment phone call with that customer and explain the ins and outs of the software to them and give them a good example of how to use it. And we would go to the point of even FaceTiming with some that had a really hard time with maneuvering through the system. And that really helped to get them to prepare, because you have to, not only can you see the pricing and see what we offer, it prepared them for that appointment, so it went that much smoother.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nancy. Okay, welcome. So Yvonne, you come from a different side. You come from the sales side. So why don't you tell us what that experience is like for the Warmington residential buyers?
So we pride ourselves in spending a lot of time training our sales staff to work seamlessly with the designers. And we really do feel it makes all the difference in the world. So similar to what Nancy and Brenda have shared, we use an online catalog as well, which is Studio Chateau. And it's something that is introduced to the new home buyer at the point of sale. So we provide them a little handout that explains a temporary password that will grant them access to become acquainted with the program, so that they can navigate it at their leisure and start getting comfortable and, as Nancy said, prepared for their upcoming meeting. It allows them to kind of get through a lot of the options and possibilities that they have interest in, and also opens up the conversation with the sales counselor in the early part of the process to understand budgets. And that's one of the things that I feel that we're able to be instrumental in as well from a sales standpoint, is preparing the home buyer for how they can arrive at their design appointment with endless possibilities at hand. Many times what we hear is customers who would like to duplicate what they see in one of our model homes. And they want to know, well, how much would it cost for me to do exactly what you did in the Plan 1 model, for example? And we have that answer. Of course we have that answer. But what we try to do is tailor that response based on what their budgetary constraints and desires are. So in doing so, we can say, you know, based on where you would like to be with regards to a monthly payment or an overall purchase price, there's different ways to go about it. We can achieve that same look with a variety of different product types. And so while you may not want to spend, for example, exactly what it would cost theoretically to duplicate the model home, no worries, because we could absolutely achieve that goal for you with endless possibilities and different product types, whether it be flooring or countertops, cabinetry. So we try to be prepared to make sure that the buyer still feels that they can achieve their goals from a design standpoint and a budgetary standpoint.
Awesome. So our next question is, how does sales and or designers set the expectation for the home buyer to understand the standard home that they are purchasing versus the upgraded models that they are walking through pretty much on a weekly basis? So, you know, we don't want them to be disappointed when they go into their house if they couldn't afford everything to duplicate the model, and they just need to understand what they're getting. So we're going to start with Brenda again, and why don't you tell us how you guys are doing that?
Sales helps us out a lot with this. They'll normally do a walkthrough at the beginning as well and answer a lot of questions when the buyer's actually on site. And then once they come to the studio, that's one of the first things before the appointment begins that our design team does as well. So they'll have out the floor plan that would be showing where all of the included flooring would be coming in the home. So tile, obviously, entry, kitchen, bathrooms, or whatever it is that the builder is offering. So that's where we start. We start with the floor plan. We start with showing them flooring. If electrical options are being sold by the design team, then we're showing standard locations for that as well. So things that are actually on plans and blueprints. And then from there, we're moving throughout the studio. And so at each point that a product is offered, whether it's cabinetry or flooring or plumbing or whatnot, we're showing what is included, and then we're offering the enhancements from that point forward. So the buyer is seeing you know, what is included at each step along the way.
Great. So Nancy, the same question for you. So how are you guys determining the differences?
We are doing it pretty much the same way as Brenda just described it. One thing that we did have was in the sales offices, we actually had a display for the standard. So we would have pull-out drawers that housed what our standard cabinet color was and the style, along with other color chips showing, okay, you have 4 different colors to pick from that are included. And we did that with each standard in the home. We also had displays showing pictures, photos of what the standard plumbing would be, sinks, things like that. So they had a great understanding of what they were going to be getting in that home. The other thing too is our models are our store, as we always call it. And I've learned that from Nancy G. But we did develop a model that would have a standard bathroom, a standard secondary bathroom. So we could at least show some of those products in full view. and then the customer could actually see what they were getting as well. So we had a couple of different things that we did to really give that visual, because it's all about them seeing it and then walking around and looking at the upgrades from there. And then they could come into the showroom and design and have a clear understanding of exactly what they were getting.
So did you have a whole house that was set up as a model? I mean, as a standard that they were able to use, or was it just different areas in the house?
Different areas of the house. We would do a standard appliance package,
Got it.
standard kitchen sink and faucet, a secondary bathroom would be standard, those types of things. And then we kept our upgrades with countertops and primary bathroom layouts. We would show those a little more upscale.
Great.
But it gave them a good understanding.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I hadn't seen a standard model in
A long time.
really long time. So that's why I was just wondering what you guys were doing different. And then Yvonne, why don't you talk a little bit about how that works over at Warmington?
Sure. I don't know that I have anything too different to offer from what Brenda and Nancy have already shared. I will say that when it comes to attached housing, we try to accomplish that in a more simpler fashion by way of, let's say we have a building of 6 units, we'll make, model homes designed, furnished model homes for 2 of the units, and we'll usually try to select an adjacent unit right next to that to display a lot of the included features, so that as the sales professional is doing their presentation, it becomes just a next extension from the displays shown in the models and the presentation tailored around the model homes and the possibilities that are available to buyers, to then taking them in to see what, if they are not looking to upgrade, their home would look like just right next door. So we do try to do that. And us too, we don't usually do an entire included features home. We have found that buyers, for the most part, continue to want to see a little bit of personalization in the homes, whether it be with the backsplash in the kitchen or flooring, those seem to be, or the primary bathroom. So we will sometimes kind of sprinkle in some of the included features amongst 1 or 2 of the units. So it's a lot more easy for the sales team when it is attached, because then you're not having to run to the first phase of production. And many times you're going to sale before production's even reached the point in which a lot of these upgrades have been installed. So that's been helpful too.
And then I know with the online catalog, both Envision and Studio Chateau, usually when you went into countertops, there would be a photo and a description of the standard kitchen in there, and then the upgrades that would go along with it, the same with cabinets and things like that. So when they're at home, they're remembering what the standards were in line with what the options and upgrades are going to be.
Right.
Okay, got it. So, okay, so our next question is, if a home buyer wants to duplicate a model, does sales and design have any pricing to share? So Brenda, let's start with you. Do you know what the price of your models cost?
We do, because the design team has worked on the model itself. We keep all that documentation, and so if it ever needs to be referenced during the appointment itself, we have that at hand. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. And then Nancy, tell me how you're handling that.
We have all the pricing as well, but there are some things that we would not install in the home, which is more of a decorator finish. So wallpaper is a good example of one. So if somebody wants to know what it is, we could definitely give them that information or tell them the company we sourced it from if they wanted to do that research on their own. But we typically have overall pricing that we give to them. We don't print out pricing to share. That's one thing that we don't do, whether it's a field model or a model, just because prices are changing so often. And when someone sees old pricing, that's not a good thing, because when they come into our showroom, they're going to have higher prices on everything. So we don't really disclose that.
It's not good to hand out printed material because they try to hold you to that printed material. So Yvonne, how are you handling this?
I kind of touched on it already earlier. I jumped
You did.
ahead a
That's
bit,
okay.
and then I merged
That's
the first
okay.
question with this one, but it really does work hand in hand, and that is from the very beginning, as they become acquainted with the catalog and they start to kind of, put together their wish list, and, well, how does this compare to what I saw in the model, and what does this amount to versus what a model duplication would amount to and whatnot. But again, just going back to what I touched on earlier, we try to really reinforce the idea with home buyers that they can duplicate certain looks if that's what they're after, with an array of different budgets. And so really just encouraging them to look forward to and to be prepared with what those features entail when they meet with the designer, so that they have a productive and satisfying experience. And then in part, what we train our sales team to do is to just keep that line of communication very strong with the design team, so that the designer is prepared for the customer when that customer arrives to their design appointments, so that the customer feels like the team really does care and has been paying attention to what they've been saying along the way. It makes a huge difference.
Yep, it does. So great, thank you so much for that. Okay, so now let's talk about timelines and schedules. We all have them and we have to stick to them. And so Brenda, how are you guys doing that over at JR McDade?
So this is something, again, that starts at the sales office. When the buyer is signing their contract, they're given an idea of when they need to complete certain tasks by. So for the builder, the main builder that comes through our showroom, it's 20 days. I've heard some builders are 15 days, some have longer, just depending on the builder's schedule. I'm used to working with the 20-day guideline, so that is, obviously we're calling to schedule them right away and get them in as soon as possible, so that they have time for 1 to 2 appointments, just depending on what their needs are. But yes, but once that happens, they've already made their structural selections before they come into the design studio, so we know if they've opted for a 4th bedroom or an extra bathroom or whatever that may be. And then after they've made their design studio selections, once that is turned in, then the house can get started.
So they're making those structural at the sales office?
At the sales office.
With the sales counselor? Or?
So your 15 to 20 day period starts after the structurals, after all the paperwork?
Correct, because yes, that the structurals have
Oh,
been
sorry, I
selected
should
at
repeat the question. Hold
initial
on.
buyer contract. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm supposed to repeat the question. I failed already. So he was asking, does her 21 day, did you say 15?
50, she said 15 to 20, whatever the
Yeah.
schedule is that you create, it starts after all.
Right after the structural options have been made. So now,
Correct.
Brenda, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's correct, because it's all turned in the initial purchase contract for the builders that I've worked with. I know everybody is a little bit different,
Yeah.
but yes, those decisions have already been made and accepted with the purchase contract, and then the design portion of it is basically, we have the 20 days from that point.
Great, great.
Business days, 20 business days.
Technically, no, just 20 days in general. And it depends on the builder. It's obviously, that's the goal. There's exceptions given depending on if it's an out-of-town buyer that needs to make flight arrangements. Different things come up. Somebody might be taking a European vacation, but that would be something that would be included in the sales contract normally if there's some type of an extension or an exception and it's written in.
Yeah, typically where I've come from in working and running the design centers, we had like a buyer information sheet, and we had the cutoff dates on there, or the that they had to make selections by. So they knew for what we would call a stage 1 or a stage 2, they had to be done by this date. And those dates were usually backed up. They didn't know, but they were backed up so that we had time to get all the paperwork together and out to the field and out to all the subcontractors. So, but in Southern California, it's much different than how, when I was working with builders across the United States, how things were being done. So, Nancy, why don't you tell us, what are you guys doing with timelines?
Our timeline's a little bit lengthier, just because we're more of a luxury production builder. Our goal is to have, from the time we get what we call a lot specific drawing from sales, to completing the design studio paperwork. So they do get a good 60 days to do that. So the sales team will meet with the customer. They have, it's 14 days to complete structurals, because we will do custom options. We will close up walls, move walls, that type of thing. So it is a longer period of time. And then we do get that lot specific. We want to make sure it's 100% correct before it comes to us, because we also have other trades we need to send that floor plan to, so they can do appointments as well. We do send our customers out to different vendors for electrical, appliances, and custom lighting. So they have to have that plan and know where everything fits. And then we gather all that information back from those trades, put it together with our design packets, So it does typically take about 60 days to complete.
And then Yvonne, how are we doing it? How are you doing it over at Warmington?
It's been a little bit all over the board at Warmington, if I'm being honest. We've had communities in which we have been chartered with the task in sales to go to sale when we haven't even trenched.
Right.
But I would say more often than not, over the last 5 or 6 years, it's not been that. It's been, we are past framing and go for it. And at that point, there's limited options that remain available for the customer to select. And so sometimes it is a little bit of a challenge. You've got in some markets, some buyers that are more, reluctant to want to just go ahead and proceed with what has already been selected on their behalf. In other markets, it's not a problem. It really just depends on where you're at, what the demand is, what is commonplace for that given sub-market that you might be selling in. So one of the things that I am responsible for is to be really close to that and to try to keep my finger on the pulse of what is that particular dynamic for that given community, so that if we are facing a bigger challenge here, we can be nimble. And so we have not, been shy about stopping in the middle of a community and saying, this isn't gonna work. The majority of our buyers, for example, are wanting to make choices, and we're full steam ahead with construction, and we're gonna run into a problem. So we need to stop. And so we've even gone as far as changing our complete business plan to, we're gonna install cabinets, but not counters. We're gonna keep marching forward with other aspects of construction, and we're gonna circle back around and do countertops at a later date, so that we can provide customers that flexibility. So I'm fortunate to be aligned with a company that has the ability to do that, because I realize, especially in a high volume companies, that's not possible, because I've worked with high volume companies as well. And so it is something that I feel makes a big difference. And I do think too that communication is very, very key in the beginning. Sales has to spend a fair amount of time explaining to buyers what those dates mean, what options and what upgrades they're going to have available to them. And if something is a deal breaker, what other opportunities may be available to them at a later phase and that sort of thing. So it is definitely something that in sales we spend a lot of time discussing with home buyers.
So are you guys involved in the pre-plots then when you're
Yes.
having to make those decisions?
Yes, yes, and actually, Nancy, it's a good thing you brought that up, because I was going to mention that and I forgot. In communities especially where we know ahead of time that we're going to be needing to go to sale after the fact, meaning after we've already had to select a fair amount of upgrades, I spend a lot more time researching what the buyer trends are, what has been popular in a given submarket. I spend a lot of time with our designers that have been assigned to that given community, collaborate with them. We go walk a lot of product. We talk to a lot of resale brokers. We walk resale homes that have been remodeled as of late to see what buyers are putting into their homes and what they're wishing they could get in a new home that they don't currently have in their existing home, because ultimately it's my responsibility. So I have to make sure that if we've got 30 homes under construction and they're all being built a certain way, that we're going to be able to sell them.
Yep.
So it's a lot more research for sure.
Yep. I know. So, okay, so how are budgets established with the home buyers and when are they being established? So, Brenda?
So and this is probably different depending on whether it's a first-time buyer or move up or luxury, cash versus loan and whatnot. But the majority of the buyers that come through my design studio right now are obviously being pre-approved for a certain amount. And so sales and structural options has the first chance at that budget, and so it tends to be for the design studio selections that we have the remainder of what they're qualified for. So that really is what determines budget for the most part, is what the loan amount is approved for. If it's not, if it's a cash buyer, then really it's just whatever they've decided that they're comfortable with and what they want that investment number to be, and hopefully they share that with the design team when they come in. Sometimes it is important to discuss it so that we can tailor the choices and get the most most items from their wish list for that budget amount, as opposed to getting all the way to the end and they spend $100,000 and they tell you that they only had 50. So that's a lot of wasted time and heartache for the buyer at that point too. So we do like to work with them on that, just so that we can have the same common goal, because that's what my design team works on anyway, is that we just want the buyer to have a great experience. We want them to leave the design appointment feeling like they have gotten the majority of what they would like, and if they do have to sacrifice on some things, hopefully it just outweighs with the things that they were able to get and customize. So
Great, thank you. Nancy?
I'm tying right into that. Whether with our luxury production customer, we do have probably about 50% cash, 50% that do loans. But even with the cash buyers, they have a budget in mind. So sales does a terrific job at working with them up front to work with them to see what they're wanting to spend, and also handing that information down to us. So if we know that they're going to be on a tighter budget, they let us know ahead of time. So that way when we meet with the customer, we kind of know how to guide them. So we're working really, really close with the sales team at that point. And we do have a pretty good handoff with our sales team from that. And then we do design within their budget. Some of them come in and the sky's the limit. They put everything in. But we will work with that customer, and if they do end up spending too much, and we work with them on how can we value engineer just a little bit to get them still a beautiful home, but also stay within the means that they want to spend on that home.
So are appraisals an issue these days anymore?
that hasn't come
We
up.
haven't had
I
that.
haven't heard about it. That's
Yeah.
why I'm
Haven't.
asking.
Yeah.
So Yvonne, you're not seeing
No,
that either?
I'm not.
Me either.
No.
No, where I'm doing some work in Southern Cal, I'm not seeing it either. So, cool. Okay, Yvonne, let's jump over to you.
So establishing budgets is something that is handled pretty early on in the process. And partly it naturally opens up to that conversation because at our communities, part of the sales process entails a home buyer obtaining a pre-qualification status from one of our preferred lenders. So in order to move forward with the purchase of a home, we have to know that they are pre-qualified and they're ready to go financially. And so in that discussion and in that discovery, we spend some time along with our loan officer addressing their goals for upgrading and personalizing their home, as well as their overall goals for their monthly payment. It used to be, when we had incentive packages that were offered in certain markets, that many times buyers would elect to use certain credits or incentives that were offered by the builder to select upgrades. Lately, it seems like there's, I don't know why, but a little bit of a concern with regards to mortgage rates. And, and most of those incentives are being used to buy down interest rates in order to get a little more comfortable. So lately, a lot of the focus has been centered around how much their budget would really impact their mortgage payment. A lot of times people are pleasantly surprised to learn that adding $40,000 in upgrades is not really making a significant of a difference in their monthly payment as they would have maybe otherwise thought. So we do educate the buyers and spend some time with them running different monthly payment scenarios for them under the different rates that we might be able to assist them with obtaining through the credits that are being offered at our various communities. And that's enabling buyers to be more excited about the fact that they're buying a home, and while they're nervous about mortgage rates, they're excited that they're hearing that they can still achieve some of the finishes that they were hoping to achieve at a reasonable difference in mortgage payment.
Yeah, I know when we were with Studio Chateau and Envision, there is a calculator in there. So it actually keeps track of how much
Right.
they're wishing for. They can't really order anything, they can just only wish. And then the designer will have to order it for them, or the sales counselor, or the options coordinator, whoever is doing it. And then it also is a mortgage calculator in there, and you can plug in 30 years at 7%, 8%, I don't know. When I bought my first house, it was 16.5% adjustable. So just letting you know how old I am, everybody, and they said it would never be single digit. So I see, we'll get to you, there's a question back there, and I'm gonna remember to reiterate it.
Okay, so this kind of bridges the last question too, but what are you doing with clients that come back and change their selections after, what kind of penalties in the schedule or in change order fees
You're fine. Your voice is beautiful.
Yes.
Should I repeat it?
Yes, please.
So the last question and this question, just to find out what you do as far as penalties for a client that continually changes their mind after the selection deadline in either change order fees and affecting the schedule, because like you said, you have a different background as far as how you manage your schedule, whether it's last minute, with putting your cabinet bases in, but you always have those clients that like to push the envelope on their changes after the fact. So
Yeah.
how do you handle that situation?
Go ahead, Brenda.
I'll start. I'm sure ours are all a little bit different. So the builder that I am currently working with right now is probably the most lax that I have seen, in the sense of they basically, the buyer would go to the sales office first, or the design team. Normally it starts with sales, and then it just really needs to be approved by their VP of sales and then also their VP of construction. So they're deciding at that time if it's past the stage or not, and if it's not past the stage, then basically it's allowed without even a change fee. Normally, the builders that I've worked with in the past, I've seen it all sorts of different ways, but they would, if it wasn't past the stage, then they had a $500 change fee, and then it was submitted after that point, but it wasn't necessary to go through VP of construction or sales. It depends on the market. I will say what I see builders normally saying yes or no to. With other builders in the past, it was, if it was a good market, it was a hard no changes.
Yep.
Paperwork was stamped and there wasn't any going back. Obviously, in a more buyer-focused market where builders are trying to hold on to every sale, it's a lot more generous. So.
Does anyone have anything different to add to that?
Well, we are pretty close in relation to how you handle late changes, and we actually have a form that we have to fill out. It goes through whatever the request is. It could be a sales request or a design studio request. Whoever gets that request, we have to submit it to construction. And again, we have to check the phase of the house, and if it's before the cutoff, 95% of the time we will do it. We do charge a change fee of $500 to do that. If there's something that is going to cause a delay on the home, it is looked at, and then there is a charge for how many days we're gonna put that house back on hold, because it costs the builder money every day that house sits and nothing is being installed. So we will go back and tell the customer, you're gonna be paying $500 a day for how many days you're setting us off construction. And then depending on the change also, they have to put a 20% deposit down, even to get the change rolling. So we do have a little bit more strict policy.
And Yvonne, how's Warmington doing it today?
We're pretty flexible, I would say. One of the things that we try to be mindful of is that we are not a big public company.
Right. The
So
advantage
we
of-
feel that, it's, one might say, yeah, you don't have the luxury of saying no. But the other way of looking at it is it's a unique opportunity to be the builder that says, we'll work with you. And it really, I think, helps us stand apart a little bit. So we do within reason, because at the end of the day, we're a production home builder.
Right.
Bottom line, we're not a custom home builder.
Right.
But so there are limitations, but we do try and work with home buyers, and they appreciate the efforts in trying to accommodate their requests. I just had a request come through my email just yesterday or the day before of a buyer who wanted to select the standard tile, but they wanted a different color of the standard tile in each of the standard tile areas. So they wanted white tile at the entry, like the rose color in the kitchen, the gray color in the laundry, and I forget what other color, but it was very unusual. I had never had that request before. And so my initial thought was, no, that doesn't sound right. But then I thought, okay, this is their home. And at the end of the day, if that's really what they want, I just need to know that if this home comes back on the market, that I'm not stuck with having to sell a home with 4 different tile colors. So we were able to come up with a plan where I requested a deposit be held until the close of escrow, which
case.
would basically be the amount that it would cost Warmington to go in and replace the tile later if necessary.
Got it. Hold on one second. Did we answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and I think we had one back here. Do you still have a question, sir? Back there? Nope? Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Nancy, when you mentioned you take a 20% deposit just to get the ball rolling, is that Nancy, you mentioned that you take a 20% deposit to get the ball rolling. Is that non-refundable?
Yes, it is.
And so some of these changes can be pretty substantial?
They can be, just depending on what they're wanting. I haven't seen anything astronomical, but a lot of it happens with lighting and things like that because they do a lot of custom lights that are very expensive. So in order to get that change to go through, they will have to put that deposit down.
And that's after a certain point in time, that 20% deposit?
We consider anything after the start of the home a late change. And then we will look at the phase as well. But a lot of times we'll have a customer come back very late in the process and want to add lighting fixtures. And sometimes we don't even have time to order them because we do have a company that replicates restoration hardware fixtures and all types of custom type lights. So those are very time consuming. So we have to have that deposit up front.
And I expect you have a lot of communication setting the expectations up front. So when you have to do this, A, how often do you do that? And B, what are the client's responses when you do that? Is it like I told you so, we warned you 8 different times, or how does that go over?
That's what you want to say.
Right. No, we do set the expectation with them up front, and we do have it in their contract too about the late change policy that we have, so that it's not something they're not aware of when they're coming into that, wanting that request.
And as Brenda had said, depending on, I think this is like probably the 5th time I've been through the highs and lows of a market, depending on where we are in the market is really whether it's a seller's market or a buyer's market is where they really tend to make those decisions. But what we found that worked the best when that happens is that it actually went back to sales, and sales filled out the form and got construction involved. Everybody was involved and signed off on it, and they gave them a date that they had to have it done by and how much it was going to cost for them to do it. And that's how we went through that process when it was allowed to happen. So, okay, let's jump to our next question. So, this is the big one. So, how many are doing packages out there? Is everyone doing packages? This is my question. So, are home buyers wanting and liking packages? Go ahead, Brenda.
I'm
Let's
first.
start with you.
Oh, this is a hot topic. Packages. So I'll just start off of what my notes said. I obviously have personal feelings about packages, but so as far as home buyers, focusing just on that, investors, obviously, when it was a hotter investor market, I think that we've seen a slowdown with that with interest rates. But when a large majority of the home purchases were being done by investors, packages were very easy for them, obviously. So I think maybe that was where obviously builders that were utilizing package programs, that was to their advantage because the investor would know what their all-in costs would be. It was an easier sell, and they didn't have to take the time to come in and customize the home in a design studio appointment. Also, anybody that was going through when design studios were shut down for the most part in 2020, and builders were able to offer packages at that time too. It made the selection process also easier because we could utilize photos for what buyers are going to be selecting from and whatnot too. So different scenarios for that where I said in between 15 to 20% of buyers that were looking for that type of package program. Otherwise, I would say that the rest of the buyers are still looking for the ability to customize. And whatever that looks like for your particular builder, obviously they're still only able to customize up until the extent that the builder offers the options in their program. But they do still want to be able to make those selections and make the home the way they want it to be. And a lot of times, people aren't wanting to come in and remodel a brand new home. So that's one of the reasons why they're selling their home, is because they don't want to go through that and they just want to be able to start new and start fresh. And so that is one of the advantages of buying a new home, is to be able to offer the buyers that customization option.
Okay. We can throw in our personal opinions after, because
Yes.
we all have them.
Has to be on the side.
So go ahead, Nance.
Well, packages they've always been a discussion.
Yes.
But with Camelot, we don't have any packages. I feel that we could use packages for certain things like single-family rentals that we're doing. I know part of our company has that in their business line. And that works well for a package type of situation. Some condos and townhomes as well. But for the most part with single family homes, they want to come in, look, touch and feel and see everything. And they want to be able to pick and choose what they want. So the only thing that we would say we package are like plumbing suites, so we have everything match. But again, they're picking and choosing where they want those to go, so they could mix and match everything. So honestly, it's a low percentage. I feel like that 15% is where the market is with that. But other than that, the majority of our homeowners just want to be able to get that customization. And they like having a designer. They do. We have quite a few that come in with an independent designer, even though we have very seasoned designers that work for us. They just want to have that customization. So I still feel like that's always going to be here.
Yep.
Nancy, can I go back for just 1 second?
You can.
Nancy Ray brought up something that I wanted to mention as well, and it's not packages in the sense of the difference with option bundling.
Right.
And so I have seen option bundling done in very great ways before.
Me too.
Where it's cutting down on the decision-making process for the buyer during the design appointment. It's focusing on, let's just say, kitchen cabinets, for example. If you have a designer kitchen package where you're including 42-inch uppers and crown molding, side panels for the refrigerator, roll-out drawers, things like that, and you have that as one option, that's a great take rate.
Yep.
It works really well, and it saves a lot of time. As opposed to having all these individual parts and pieces, and it helps obviously with purchasing and their
production.
cutting down on
does.
SKUs and production
Yeah.
and whatnot. So I am a big fan of option bundling.
Me too. I am too.
So,
I am too.
yes.
I think it's, and one of the things that I will, before we get to Yvonne, is I know the difficulty over the years that when I was running design centers that we had with packages is bringing them into the design studio. And it's the hardest. So you're showing them finished packages of flooring, 3 choices that they get, A, B, or C, or whatever pretty name we're going to call it for the time. And then they get to see everything else in the design studio. So it was really hard to then tell the client why they can't have all the carpet, why they can't have all the hardwood and everything else that's in there, and why they have to stick to their package over there. So that was the difficulty that we found, is bringing them actually to the studio. So Yvonne, why don't you tell us from a sales side, what are you hearing?
So we've experimented quite a bit over the last few years with packages, and of course the traditional way of allowing a customer to go to the design center and experience the full design center process of personalizing their home. And what we learned overall is that in some cases where we felt we had to, because of the business plan and construction having to get so far ahead of our sales efforts, those markets in which those that were very resale dominant, meaning there was hardly any new construction around, and therefore your walk-in traffic and the brokers involved were predominantly just exposed to resale, they were pretty excited about the fact that we could offer designer curated packages. And I think that that is one of the key elements to this whole thing that I would volunteer and say makes a huge difference. It's one thing to have a builder just put together a team of individuals and say, put together some colors that seem to go well together, and let's call that option A package, option B package, etc.
Usually the purchasing department.
Yeah, usually, and nothing
'Cause
wrong
they-
with our
they work
purchasing
with a lot
departments.
of
They're
buyers.
wonderful, but they're not designers, right?
Right, and they work with a lot of buyers in purchasing department.
Yeah, right. And so what we've done when we have gone the route of having to do packages is our designers are front and center.
Yeah.
They are the ones that are leading the charge, establishing and designing and curating those packages. And it helps because in markets where maybe you do face a little bit of apprehension with buyers, the moment they understand that there is a professional designer that was involved in selecting these finishes, they feel more at ease, and they're more grateful for the fact that there was some careful thought put into the finishes in their home. So it's been a little bit all over the board, and I can tell you that while we personally have not attempted to do packages in areas where there is a lot of new home construction, I have seen other builders who have attempted it and it hasn't gone well because buyers at that point are accustomed and expecting the ability to personalize their home and don't want to be told that while your home is just starting framing, you have 0 choices here. We're going to pick it all out for you. So it's a little bit of, a different reaction from a buyer's standpoint, depending on those factors.
Yeah.
And again, I think that when they are necessary, I personally feel it's essential to have the designers involved.
Yep, I agree with you there. I also know from on the other side of that, the manufacturing side, they're supposed to be guaranteeing those packages and the products that are in those packages for the life of that project or however long you're going to be in there, and that just is not happening across the board. And it's really hard to go back to a client and say, yes, you had package 2 and it was going to include these items in there, but guess what, that tile is no longer available and they're not making it, so now we need to reselect, which then opens the door to why can't we reselect to something else. So just that, it's really tricky with those packages sometimes. So does anyone have any comments about packages out there? Are they working or not working? Okay, and I think we are just going to hit on the highlights here. So this is what I took away from everything when I was reading through all the notes that you guys sent me, and thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. So it's really the sales professional is the one that is preparing the home buyer for the online catalog experience that they're going to have, and that's what we were focusing on, technology. And they're also preparing them if there is no technology involved. They're just preparing them. And that basically one of the things that is really helpful, and I think Yvonne, maybe you didn't mention it, but there's a lot of collateral that's in the models. So where people are putting down and saying like in this kitchen, so there's like a little cheat sheet in baskets that say in this kitchen, these are the upgrades in the kitchen,
Right.
and in all areas of the house. Are you guys, is everyone still
We
doing that?
do offer that, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think I touched on it, you're right, but yeah, we
but
definitely do
did.
offer
We talked
that.
about that. So the collateral is very helpful walking through the houses when they can do that. Also, the sales professionals should be able to give a general range of model pricing to prospective and contracted home buyers. Leaving the exact pricing is really where it needs to go at the design center or with your designer, only because, as Nancy said, pricing does change. And when they're hearing from somebody from your corporation that that model to upgrade and duplicate the flooring in there is $45,000, well, that flooring's been down for a year, so it might not be $45,000 any longer to do that. It might be closer to 48 now. So just a range is really, in my experience, what always worked better when I got the unhappy clients that we'd call to speak with me about the wrong numbers that were being told to them. And then also the sales professional should explain the timelines at the point of sale, what's included in the house in their home that they're buying. Where are they, because each home could be in a different stage. You know, I know they're all done in phases, and some phases might have 10 houses, some might have 3 in it, but the phasing is all a little bit differently, and they need to know what they're getting at the time they're purchasing their house, and what they're not getting is really important for them to understand. So there's not, the disappointment doesn't start at that fun experience at the design studio when they get to say, oh, you didn't get that, you didn't get that. So we should just be really communicating very well with that. And then home buyer budgets, which I actually call them investments. Home buyer investments should be established by the sales professional because they understand the whole process with the loan or if they're a cash buyer and what they're doing. So, and then most new home buyers are looking to personalize their new home. However, the right curated designer packages do work depending on the community, the home type, timing, location, and price point. So, does anybody have anything else to add to that?
Question with customization.
Perfect, thank you.
So those of you that do custom options, we recently had our buyers make an investment, basically a D&E fee, for us to explore the option they wanted. I'm just curious if any of you are doing that, or if you just take every custom option request and someone prices it and you give them that price back.
I have an answer.
You
Sorry,
go ahead.
I'll give you my answer. So we used to, in the different markets I worked at, because there was a point where I had 65 design studios and I worked for many builders. And so some were doing that same thing where they were really letting them customize, and then most production builders that were typical production were not. They were saying these are the options we are doing. I know Nancy had mentioned that they'll move walls and change all of that. So is that different than, so you don't already have pre-established custom items?
We do. We have structural items that are flex options that we already have on our homes, but if somebody does want to customize that, we will look at it and make sure that we're capable of doing it in a production format.
Does that have to go
But-
back through the city? I'm sorry.
Right, but will they pay you $500 up front for your team to do that work, to tell them how much it's gonna cost them? Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
basically, if they buy the option, the 500 goes to the option.
Yes.
If they don't buy the option, no, the 500 goes to you for doing the work
Yeah.
to put the option together.
Yeah, typically when we're customizing, it's before the home started. So we just entertain to see if we can even build it. We don't charge them anything for that, but it's part of our structural process, which we have 2 weeks to do before we get that lot specific completed. So basically before it's gone to start, got a permit and all that, we'll even know if we can do it, price it to the customer, and then we price out the entire change and then let them know what the price is and see if at that point they want to proceed. But we don't ask them for any additional money for that. It just gets added onto their contract.
Right, just to tell you what we've done, we probably had a 25% capture rate of all the options we priced before putting this in place. Now we're probably about 95. So if they request and pay, about 95% of those customers are actually buying that option.
I'm used to seeing it the way that you described. So that $500 fee just to request the custom option, and then it does go towards it if they accept it. If not, we just keep it.
Great. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up, and I'm supposed to tell you it's time to connect with your group leaders, and they're going to escort you to